So this past weekend, the English dub of Dragon Ball Super episode 66 premiered on Toonami, featuring, if you don't remember, the big climactic showdown between Vegito Blue, who made his first appearance in Dragon Ball Super in this episode, versus Zamasu, and of course, the ending scene where Trunks gathers up the energy to slice Zamasu in half. Now, this episode was kind of the topic of discussion on Twitter for a while amongst the Dragon Ball fandom about really not just the episode, but the entire arc and the dubbing and sort of what has changed between what they did with the old Dragon Ball Z dub, with the Dragon Ball Kai dub, and now with Super. What I want to talk about real quick is I'm going to talk about this episode, kind of my thoughts on the dub and what's been going on the past few weeks, but also I want to address this sort of controversy and this little bit of a civil war in the fandom amongst fans trying to dissect the dub. Now, what's ironic about all this is that I feel like in this argument, I'm actually not agreeing with a lot of my friends, but I'm also not disagreeing, okay? I'm going to get to what I mean here in a minute, but first I want to tell you a little bit about sort of my history with this. So, unlike a lot of other people, I got into Dragon Ball in 1994, watching what I didn't know at the time what it was. It was the Bardock special, and in Japanese, and then I started watching it in English, Spanish, and Japanese. And there was a time in the late 90s when I was a teenager where I really hated the English dub. That old Dragon Ball Z dub that everybody loves, or not everybody, but a lot of people love that dub. I hated it because that dub was not a very good dub. The script changes were just annoying. There were a lot of character changes. There was a lot of things that were going on at the time that just made it a bad dub. Now, if you like that dub and you have nostalgia for it, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But me being the purist that I was, because I was a super hardcore purist, any single dub change they made really bugged me. And the problem with the Z dub is that there were many changes made and many important scenes that I felt were ruined by that Z dub. And I'm not the only one. There was a whole movement back then from Dragon Ball fans who hated what they did with that Z dub. Now, obviously, years have gone by, and I kind of have not really, I'm not an angry young man anymore like I was back then. A lot of us have kind of grown up, so it's not really a big deal. But the beautiful thing now is not only is Dragon Ball Z available to watch both in Japanese and English legally, which we did not have back then, at least not all of it. Now we have the Dragon Ball Kai dub. Now, whether or not you like Kai, obviously some people don't like Kai and some people love Kai. Kai was a better script. It was more accurate. It was probably the most accurate Dragon Ball Z dub that's ever been produced in the English-speaking world. It's the most accurate one. Not everybody ever gave it a chance, but it is more accurate. Now, that being said, it's still not 100%. And the problem is there's no such thing as a perfect Dragon Ball dub. They've all got their issues, but the real kind of core to all this is that when it comes to English dubs, everybody has their own idea of what a perfect dub actually is. And we could have arguments and debates all day about it. Some people don't want Japanese terms to be used in an English dub. For example, Hakai with Beerus. Some love that, some don't like it. Some folks wanted them to use Makanko Sapo, which is the special beam cannon in the dub, which was a made-up dub name. It's not the translation of that move. And they used it in Kai for a while, then they stopped using it. So everybody has their own kind of opinion on what a perfect dub is. And we're just never going to get a perfect dub when it comes to Dragon Ball. That being said, though, the Dragon Ball Super dub has slightly regressed in comparison to Kai. Kai was, not flawless, but very, very, very good. Dragon Ball Super's dub, not quite as good, but one thing I'll tell you, and you're talking to a guy who was critical of the original Z dub for many, many years. The Dragon Ball Super dub has nowhere even remotely close to the problems that the Z dub had. But some people are, in my opinion, there's a difference between, constructive criticism and actual, pointless nitpicking. On Twitter, if you follow me, you know what I'm talking about, where people were actually complaining that that Zamasu did not scream out Son Goku in this episode. They have only referred to Goku as Son Goku in the English dub one time. in Kai. It wasn't even Z, it was in Kai, and it was a line that Sean Schemmel had to ask Justin Cook for permission to say, and they let him get away with it one time. So if you're expecting the Dragon Ball Super dub to magically call him Son Goku now, it's just unrealistic and it's nitpicky. You know, if you're going to ask for that, you might as well ask for all the times in Kai when they did not call him Son Goku. Or you might as well complain about how the Supreme Kai is not called Kaioshin, or complaining about why the Saiyans are called or not called Saiyans, because Saiyans is a more accurate way to say Saiyajin. To me, even though I understand the passion and the perspective, to me, it's a pointless argument because these things have not been changed. If they weren't changed in Kai, very slim chance they would be changed in Super. Kaioken used to be called Kaioken in the dub. Thankfully, they fixed that. There are some fixes. But I think that nitpicking those kinds of things, in my opinion, is completely pointless. That being said, when we talk about this episode and this arc and whatnot, you know, there are things that are, in my opinion, less than perfect. Now, I will say this, all right? I feel like Sean Schemmel's screams are still great. I feel like Monica Rial has been a great highlight of this arc. Same thing with Colleen Clinkenbeard. In this episode, I thought Schemmel did a pretty good job. And to me, the biggest surprise about episode 66 and really the whole arc has been James Marsters' portrayal of Zamasu. And if you missed the other videos I've done, yes, that is James Marsters. He's using an alias for the dub because of, well, it's really a long, convoluted story, but it has to do with union contracts and things like that. But it's James Marsters. Voice actors use aliases all the time. You know, the biggest one, I guess, would be D'Artagnan Nickelback is the alias of Damian Clark. It happens all the time, but it's James Marsters. He's been a real highlight, a real treat here, and he's an actual actor. And I've interviewed on this channel, you know, Monica Rial herself, and I've talked to, you know, tons of voice actors, and they all pretty much say the same thing, that if you're an actual actor, being a voice actor, it really helps. It gives you a good skill set. So James Marsters is a natural at playing Zamasu. I think he's done a great job. I'm going to get to sort of my issues with the dub, or at least this episode, shortly. But I did want to say one thing that I really did enjoy is Gowasu's explanation of the fusion being permanent. I can't tell you how many times I have answered this question, whether it be on different social media, on the channel. You know, in the Japanese version, Gowasu explains that fusion is only permanent when gods are involved. And when he said that, obviously what he was talking about was at least one person who's fusing has to be a god, at least one of them, which is why when old Kai fused with the witch, they were permanently fused. For some reason, Dragon Ball fans either forgot that or it didn't register, but in the English dub, he says the fusion is permanent if a Supreme Kai is involved, if a god is involved. So you don't have to have two gods for it to be permanent. You can have one god fuse and it works. I'm so happy he said it like that because that's going to confuse less people. Those are good things the dub can do to fix things. So that's good. Now, the first half of the episode was pretty accurate. There's a few minor changes with some words, but there was nothing that really, truly offended me. There were some things that I kind of wish were in the episode that weren't. For example, there's a line in the Japanese version where Vegito says, you know, hurry up and squash me. You know, that wasn't in the, in this version. There's a line where Zamasu's like, you know, I just want you dead. There were some lines that just weren't great. There were some lines that were, to me, people are nitpicking it a bit too much. You know, Vegito says, there's a line where Vegito's like, you know, your divine power is not looking so wondrous now. And in the Japanese version, he's like, oh, is this really the only power of a god? I feel like with this dub, what they were trying to do is they're trying to use like more sophisticated dialogue and bigger words. And I get it, but at the same time, Dragon Ball is very simple. You know, and I know why it's not like it's so sophisticated with the English language that kids aren't going to get it, but keep things simple. You know, a lot of times what they've done with this dub is they've tried a little bit too hard to be cute. And to me, it's not necessary. You know, like there's a scene, for example, where, you know, like I said, James Marsters is great, but he totally hams it up. He's about to stab Vegito and he's like, dust to dust. He didn't say that in the Japanese version. That's cheesy. Also, another thing I found weird is they changed the word immortal to invincible. It's not exactly the same thing, but it did not bug me. Like, immortal and invincible are kind of two different things necessarily, but they sort of mean the same thing within this context. I wish they would have kept the word immortal. They choose bigger words sometimes. Something else that they've done a lot with the dub, and this is something that I'm not really sure why, is that Vegeta and other characters say damn, hell. In fact, there's a lot of this stuff where, for example, there's a line in this episode where Vegito says, be perfect in hell. And then Yajirobe says, give him hell. Like, I feel like, this is going to sound weird, but I feel like Funimation was so like, or whoever's writing this, was so like anti-Dragon Ball Z dub because they hated the fact they could not use the word hell. They had to call it the Home for Infinite Losers, the HFIL, that whoever's doing this, whether it be Sabbath or whoever's actually writing this stuff, is like, the translator could be Steve Simmons. He's like, you know what? Let's use the word hell over and over and over again, because they use the word hell and damn, and they're not really curse words, but they're, you know, edgy words way, way, way more than they should. And to me, it's like, it doesn't bother me, but I'm just wondering, are you guys trying to make up for like the Z-dub being overly censored to where you're trying to be overly edgy? Like, I feel like there's no sense in doing that. It sounds cool, don't get me wrong, but it's just weird how they do it. You know, Gowasu also was a little bit too much. You know, there's a scene where he's talking to Trunks and he's like, you know, he has become a broken and misshapen god. And the Japanese version, he's talking about the hatred for mortals. Stuff like that did not bug me, but it's definitely something that I would have preferred to be a little bit different. I just feel like they realize they don't have that Z-dub censorship, so they want to go like to the next level and kind of push it as far as they can. You know, in fact, the word God was used a lot, and there was a time when you could not use the word God in the Z-dub. In the old Dragon Ball Z-dub, you could not use the word God. You know, Dende and Kami are the guardians of Earth. No, they're the gods of Earth. Saichoto, the Grand Elder of Namek, is named Guru, right? Even though he was essentially the god of that planet. You know, the Kais, they're all gods, but they don't use those words in the Z-dub, and it wasn't until Battle of Gods that they kind of had to use it because of God of Destruction and Super Saiyan God. They were forced to use the word God because Super Saiyan Kami and Kami of Destruction just doesn't sound as cool. You know what I mean? They had to. And I feel like now it's like they're releasing all that pent up, you know, damn it, we can do whatever the hell we want now. Let's make it cool. That's what they're doing. The problem is, at least some inaccuracies. Now, a lot of folks have been criticizing Eric Vale's performance. I really enjoyed it. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. The speech he gave at the end of the episode, you know, there's a part where he says, compared to gods, we are weak. I did not like that, and I criticized this before. Some of the lines they gave Trunks, and this is not Eric Vale's fault, some of the lines they gave him are not very good. Some are good, some are not good. It's very, very hit or miss. There's actually scenes in the Super Dub where they'll have one really cool line and then one really bad line in the same sentence. Like, it's weird they do that. The final speech he gave when he stabbed Zamasu in the chest was amazing. I thought Vale did a great job. There were a couple of changes that were a little bit cheesy, but again, to me, they just were not offensive. Performance-wise, it was fine. You know, it's just one of those things where it did not bother me. And I just feel like if you're bothered by things that are this minute, I feel like people should focus their energy on something worth complaining about, like the script changes, the actual changes to the story and the characters versus little things like this. To me, it's not a big deal at all. Like, the lore was not affected at all. It just did not bug me. Again, but I lived through that Z-dub. I lived through it. And nobody can sit there and say they're more of a purist than I am, because I'm in that weird category of super hardcore fans, and it really didn't bother me. And I expected it to, considering all the shit that people were saying on the internet about it. That being said, you know, I asked Chris Sabat at KamehaCon during the Future Trunks panel that I hosted, I said, why is the Super Dub kind of in between the Z and the Kai Dub? And his response was that he feels like everybody already saw it in Japanese, so when they have the English dub, they can do their own flavor and kind of have more fun with it. Even though I understand where they're coming from, I completely vehemently disagree with this. It does not bother me too much, but that being said, there's going to be kids who are going to get into Super and Dragon Ball only watching it dubbed. Not just kids, but also adults. So if you're going to be inaccurate, we're going to deal with the same thing we dealt with back in the Z-dub, where you have a story that people get confused about, or that people, you know, get, you know, I guess it doesn't match up with other fans. That being said, though, even though I don't agree with what Sabat said, There's nothing in Dragon Ball Super that comes close to the Hope of the Universe speech or any of that stuff that Z did to really change things. None of that is really in Super. So until we get something that bad, I haven't seen anything that bad. The only thing that came close was that Super Saiyan please line. That I hated that line. It was pretty bad. But other than that, it doesn't bug me that much. It could be better, yes, but to me, it's fine. It was fun to watch again, and we'll see where they go next week. So let me know your thoughts down below. Do you hate the super dub? Do you like the super dub? Are people nitpicking it too much? Or are their criticisms fair? A lot of these folks are my friends. They are, and we're cool. It's just that to me, I just keep thinking, dude, this is not the Z dub. It's nowhere near as bad. So, and I'm not, again, I get it. No, it should be better. Maybe it should, but it's just, some things are not going to change. Some they will. I know for a fact some they won't. And Goku being called son in every scene, they would have to redub the entire series from start to finish, which, hey, I wish they would do it, but it's just not going to happen. There's no money in it. There's no reason to do it. With Kai, the Japanese released a new version first, and then the Americans had to dub it. Same thing with, Super. They had to come out in Japan first. They're not just going to voluntarily redub Dragon Ball Z. It's just not going to happen. So why complain about it? Why? It's just not going to happen. I wish it would, but it's not. So let's focus on fixing Super and the real problems versus trying to get them to say Goku's last name. That's my opinion. And hey, let me know if it's yours. Talk to you soon.